Today, we're going to go through the Big Ten. We already did the SEC, so if you want to check that video out, it's on the channel and we'll link it down in the description for you. But we're going to predict all the records and we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the people who are NFL draft prospects you need to know for the 2026 NFL draft. We got a new setup. Background's different. It's not perfect, but it works for now. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this with the Illinois Fighting Illini. Their quarterback's Luke Altmaier. He was there last year. He had a pretty good year for him. He had 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, 6 picks. He hit almost 61% of his passes. He had 217 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns. He's a senior redshirt. He doesn't really have the size you look for in an NFL quarterback. I haven't finished my tape eval on him, but I do think he's probably more of a late round guy at the best case scenario for him. I'm not even sure if he'll be draftable. On offense, they have a lot of guys. Not a ton of them that I know, but the skill position players, you have Malik Elzy, Colin Dixon, you got Hudson Clement, who transferred in from West Virginia. At running back, you got Aiden Lottery and Caden Fegan. At tight end, you got Tanner Arkin. Across the O-line, they have some other guys that are draftable, and J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley at tackle. On the interior, they got Josh Getsy and Josh Kreutz, who is related to Olin Kreutz. I did forget to notate it here in my notes as I'm looking at him. I do believe it's his son, if I remember right. He played center for the Bears for a long time, so he has some NFL bloodlines. Definitely somebody to go ahead and try to keep in the back of your mind as we're going to flip it over to their defense. And honestly, there's a lot of guys that are upperclassmen on this defense. They got Xavier Scott, who played nickelback, George Lucas at edge, Torrey Cox Jr. at corner. They got a ton of transfers in, one of them being a defensive tackle and James Thompson Jr. Kurt Neal came in at the same interior defensive line position from Wisconsin. They got Tomiwa Durajawaye out of Florida State. Not sure if I'm saying that right. They got edge Leon Lowry Jr. out of Wisconsin. They do have some returning players on their defense as well outside of the first three I mentioned, and Kenna Olduga and Dylan Rosick at linebacker, and then at safety, they got Scott Miles. Either way, I actually think Illinois is going to be a pretty good team this year. I think their conference schedule actually works out pretty well for them. They're over under 7.5. For me, I'm going to go ahead and give them wins over Western Illinois, Duke, Western Michigan, Purdue, Maryland, and Northwestern. That's going to give them 6 wins right away. I don't think they'll beat Ohio State, but other than that, they have some pretty favorable draws in here, if I'm being honest with you. So I'm going to be quite aggressive with Illinois, and I'm going to go ahead and give them a final record of 9-3 and say they split some of these toss-up games. I do expect them to be better than, I guess, Vegas does. I could get burned on that. Brett Bielema, their head coach, is a very good coach, so I do trust him, and I do think that he's going to be able to make it work in the Big Ten. He didn't really work out in the SEC at Arkansas, but in the Big Ten, he's had a ton of success with the style of team he builds, and I mean it showed. It worked last year for him as well. So I'm going to trust Illinois, and a 9-3 record's pretty aggressive. Let's move on to the surprise playoff team from last year, the Indiana Hoosiers. Their new quarterback's going to be Fernando Mendoza. He transferred in from Cal. He's going to be a real NFL prospect. I've watched some of his tape already. I really like him. I think he still can grow some, and hopefully he can clean up a few things in his game. He's not the greatest runner or anything, but that's okay. He threw for 3,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 picks, hit 68.7% of his passes. He's a junior redshirt, so they could theoretically have him for 2 years. He's 6'5", 225, big-bodied guy. Like I said, more of a pocket guy. Another real NFL prospect on this team is Elijah Surratt at wide receiver. I didn't spell his name right here. I just realized that. Hopefully I get that fixed for the final version. At wide receiver, they also have E.J. Williams Jr. and Omar Cooper Jr. At running back, they got Keelan Black and Roman Hemby, who transferred in from Maryland. Lee Beebe Jr. from UAB. Tight end, they have Holden Stays, who came in from Tennessee. I do remember him. At tight end, they also have Riley Nowakowski from Wisconsin. At tackle, they got Carter Smith. At the other tackle position, they brought in a transfer in Zen Mikalski from Ohio State. On the interior, they got Pat Coogan, who came in from Notre Dame. He started for him. He's a really good player. And they also brought in Khalil Benson from Colorado. I do think they actually made some good additions in this transfer portal here to their offense. Hopefully they're able to keep it going. They're quite an interesting team, and I want to see them be able to build off what they did last year with Coach Curt Cignetti. On the defensive side, they lost some good players in the NFL, and CJ West and a few others on defense, but they got Mikhail Kamara, who's an edge rusher. They also have D'Angelo Pons, who plays corner. And at safety, they got Amari Farrell. They also have linebacker Aiden Fisher, edge Stephen Daly, who came in from Kent State. They have an interior defensive lineman in Hosea Wheeler, who came in from Western Kentucky. At safety, they brought in Lewis Moore from Ole Miss, and they brought in nickelback Devin Boykin from NC State as well. I'm really curious to see how these guys can gel, and if they can repeat what they did last year. I mean, they were very impressive. They did belong in the playoffs. Despite all the controversy around them, they belonged. Even as an SEC fan myself, as I'm a Florida Gator fan, I thought they belonged in over Bama. It just made the most sense. They earned their way in and wins have to count, so they deserved getting in there. I don't know if they'll be able to repeat under Coach Curt Cignetti this year, though. Their over-under's 8.5, and to me, that's pretty aggressive. I think they have a pretty tough schedule. They got Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State, Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, and Purdue, who I do believe are all going to be wins. So that right there, off the bat's going to give you 7 wins. That makes you feel really good. But I don't think they are going to be good enough to beat Oregon or Penn State. And then that leaves 3 toss-up games between Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois. I don't know they're going to beat Illinois this year. Iowa could be improved at quarterback with Mark Gronowski, who came in from, forget what school he came in from. They should be improved on offense. So I'm going to go ahead and actually hit the under on Indiana this year and say they take a bit of a step back. They're not going to take a big step back. I'm going to say they finish 8-4. That's still respectable in year 2. I think they surprised everybody in year 1. So it's absolutely kind of aggressive for me to say they won't be able to continue it. Cignetti's a great coach and he has a track record of success, but I'm just not a believer in their roster yet. And even though I really like their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, I do worry about the rest of their team. We'll just have to see. I could easily be wrong on this one. Let's move on to the Iowa Hawkeyes. They got Mark Gronowski, and that's where he came from, was South Dakota State. I couldn't remember where he came from for some reason. So he comes up from the FCS. He's a senior redshirt who's 6'3", 230, threw for 2,700 yards, 23 touchdowns, 7 picks. He had 10 rushing touchdowns, 380 yards on the ground. He's kind of a do-it-all quarterback, and he's going to be quite interesting to see how Iowa is going to be able to utilize him. I just don't think Iowa's the greatest team. I really don't know that I love the roster they have out there. At receiver, they got Z Vander, but he's an underclassman who's not even eligible. They also have Jacob Gill, Seth Anderson. At running back, they got Kamari Moulton trying to replace, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now. I had to take a look back at my notes there, and it was Caleb Johnson. I don't know why I couldn't remember his name. I had a good grade on him too. It just kind of slipped my mind here as I was talking, so I had to look back at my notes real quick. Either way, at tight end, they got Addison Ortega. At tackle, they got Jennings Dunker. On the interior, they got a couple guys in Logan Jones and Bo Stevens. I'm just not a believer in their offense. I don't trust Iowa at all. We'll have to see if Gronowski is going to be able to come in and actually do something for him. On defense, they have Aaron Graves, who I like. They have Xavier Nwapanka, and then at edge, they got Max Llewellyn. On the interior, they got Jeremiah Pittman. At the other edge position, they had Ethan Hurkett. They had some linebackers that were seniors in Jackson Rexroth, Jaden Harrell, and Carson Sharar. And then at corner, they also had TJ Hall. I just don't know how much I expect out of this team. Their over-under is 7.5. And I'm not very confident in this team. They should have some easy wins on the schedule over Albany, UMass, Wisconsin, and Michigan State. I think they're going to be able to win. But I also think they have 2 guaranteed losses. I don't see them beating Penn State, and I don't see them beating Oregon. They have a lot of toss-ups in there with Iowa State, Rutgers, Indiana, Minnesota, USC, Nebraska. I'm just not sure. I think they're going to have a hard path to get to 8 wins, so I'm going to have them finish 7-5 this year. I don't think that I'm being too hard on them. I'm just not really a believer, and I kind of wonder, even though Kirk Ferentz is a great coach, if it might be time for them to consider other options and just kind of restart their program totally and build it a different way with the transfer portal, because you can do things differently nowadays. And I do think that sometimes he might be holding them back a little bit. Let's move on to the Maryland Terrapins. At quarterback, they brought in Justin Martin from UCLA. He's expected to be the starter. Honestly, he hasn't really done anything in his career, so there's not a whole lot to know. He has 2 years of eligibility left, but he's a big boy at 6'4", 220. He has a lot of things that you're looking for. He was a pretty highly rated recruit when he came into UCLA, so he should have a good arm. Haven't watched any film on him, not gonna lie to you. So we'll have to see how that plays out. They're really inexperienced there. At receiver, they did get Jaleel Farouk from Oklahoma. He's a really good player. I think that he has a lot of upside. They got Caleb Webb from Tennessee, and then they had Octavian Smith Jr. already on roster. At running back, they got Nolan Ray. At tight end, they got Dorian Fleming from Georgia State. They also have Leon Houghton Jr., who could possibly contribute for him as well. A couple guys on the offensive line here that are NFL prospects based on the year. I don't know how great they're going to be. And Alan Heron, and then on the interior, they got Isaiah Wright. Looking at their defense, I'm just not a believer in that either. They have a very small number of players, as you can see. They got Jalen Husky, Lavian Scruggs, who's a safety. At corner, they got Dante Joyner, who came in from Arkansas State, and then Jamari Glasker from Wake Forest. Beyond that, they're a very young defense. They have a lot of guys who have eligibility left, and I'm just not sure how it's going to all come together for them. So it could go really well. It could go sideways for them. It's going to be tough, and I think that's why they're over-under set at 4.5 on the season. They only have 3 guaranteed wins for me, and that's to begin the season against FAU, Northern Illinois, and Towson. And then after that, I don't think they beat Wisconsin, Washington, Nebraska, Indiana, Rutgers, Illinois, Michigan. I could see a couple toss-ups in here here in UCLA and Michigan State. Honestly, I'm just not a believer in this team. I'm going to give them a 4-8 record. Say they get one of them toss-ups. I'm just not comfortable with it, to be honest with you. I don't really think they're going to be great. Let's go ahead and move on to the Michigan Wolverines. They got a true freshman coming in starting for him in Bryce Underwood. He has obviously no college stats. He's 6'4", 208. He was a top quarterback recruit. They paid him a ton of money to come in. He has all sorts of potential, but playing as a true freshman, you just don't really know what you're going to get out of him. Some other guys they got on their team at receiver, they got Frederick Moore. They also brought in a couple transfers, and Donovan McCauley from Indiana and Anthony Simpson from UMass, who I remember from my UMass dynasty on the channel last year. And if you do watch college football gaming content, we're going to be back on this channel with that this year. I kind of took a break from it after December. I got focused real heavily on the draft and just had a lot going on and got overwhelmed. I'm excited to get back into gaming content for the summer, and we're going to go until it kind of loses interest and the draft takes over. Or if it still has interest, we're going to mix it in with our draft content this year. I want to be kind of a hybrid channel here, and I just want everybody to see what I like about football, which is pretty much every aspect of it. Let's go ahead and get back to the rest of their team. They have Justice Haynes from Alabama at running back. At tight end, they got Marlon Klein. On the interior, they got Giovanni Halidi and Greg Crippen. Their offense is just kind of unknown right now, and that's just a fact. We don't know what to expect out of them. It could go one of two ways. They could go really good and take off because of Bryce Underwood, or he could have a slow start to his career, which can happen for young players as they develop into the college level. And they might take, and be a little rough this year and take a slight step back. Taking a look at their defense, they got Derek Moore on the edge, Jay Sean Barnum at linebacker, and at corner, they got Zeke Berry. They also got Rod Moore coming back at safety this year. On the interior, they got Rayshawn Benny. They got TJ Guy on the edge and Ernest Hausman, who's another upperclassman senior linebacker. I don't know what to expect out of this defensive unit. They were pretty good last year. I think they'll be able to stand firm this year. They did lose a lot of prospects, though, up the middle, and Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham and some linebackers and stuff. So I don't know what to expect from this Wolverines defense. They could take a step back if we're just being honest. Their over-under is 8.5, which feels pretty aggressive for me. I'm not going to lie to you. I gave them wins over New Mexico, Central Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland, which adds up to 6 wins on the season. So I gave everything else a toss-up. So to me, you would think that means they're going to get 9 wins. I'm not that sure of that. I'm going to give them an 8-4 record, and we're going to hit the under once again here with the Wolverines. I promise there's going to be some teams with overs, but I'm just not confident in a lot of these teams right now. Next up's Michigan State. They got at quarterback Aiden Childs, interesting prospect. He has a lot of developing to do as far as the NFL draft goes. He is a highly rated recruit though, and he came out and he has some tools there. He just has a lot of developing left to do. Last year he threw for 2,400 yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 picks. He hit just under 60% of his passes. He rushed for 225 yards, 3 touchdowns. Good news, he has 2 years eligibility left and he has a good body, and that's 6'3", 217. The bad news is for this team though, I don't like the rest of their offense. They have a lot of transfers, underclassmen who could be good. We're just not 100% sure what to expect out of this team. Nick Marsh looks like a receiving prospect who could be interesting come next year or the year after. They also have Amari Kelly, who came in from Mid-Tennessee State, Christian McCray, who came in from Kent State. At running back, they get Elijah Tawa-Tolliver from Sacramento State. They have Brandon Tullis, who's an underclassman, not eligible for the draft. They do have a legitimate NFL draft prospect, though, in Jack Velling at tight end. And then they also have Matt Golban, who came in from Wake Forest on the interior of the offensive line. I just don't trust this offense. And when it comes to their defense, I feel pretty much the same way. They got Wayne Matthews at linebacker. Safety, they got Malik Spencer and then Jordan Hall at linebacker as well. Transfers, they got in Grady Kelly on the interior from Florida State and Joshua Eaton, a corner from Texas State. They have a couple other senior returning guys in Darius Snow and Nikkei Martinez. I just don't know much about this team as far as how their draft prospects go. I feel like they're really lacking, and I don't think they're going to be a great team. Their over-under's 5.5, and I do think it's like that simply because of Aiden Childs, if I'm being honest with you. He has a certain level of talent that could really raise the ceiling of this team beyond the talent around him. I'm just not 100% sure if that's going to work out for him. So we'll have to see on that. I'm not very confident. As you can see, I only gave him 2 guaranteed wins over Western Michigan and Youngstown State. I gave him losses to Penn State, Iowa, Michigan, Indiana, and USC. And they have some toss-ups in Boston College, Nebraska, UCLA, Minnesota, and Maryland. I'm going to hit the under on this team as well. And I'm going to say 4-8. And the hardest thing for me is I think there's a lot of middle tier teams that have a chance to improve, like a Nebraska, who I trust just a little bit more. I really wasn't sure about Jonathan Smith hire. He's a great coach. He just didn't fit. He's never been in this region, never had to recruit this region. And right now it looks like it's a little bit of an uncomfortable fit to this day. So a 4-8 finish is kind of what I expect out of them. Moving on to Minnesota, they got a new quarterback in Drake Lindsay, who's somebody they're excited about, who should step in and start for him. Haven't really seen him play, so he's got a lot of raw upside. We'll just have to see at 6'5", 230 if he can reach any of his ceiling. At receiver, they got Lamika Brockington. They also have Javon Tracy, who came in from Miami of Ohio, and they got Logan Loya from UCLA. At running back, they got Darius Taylor, who is absolutely an NFL draft prospect. He is kind of slow, though, from what I've seen on film, so I'm not sure how high his ceiling really is in draft, but he absolutely will be drafted in the NFL. I'd be shocked if he ends up being undrafted, unless he takes a really bad nosedive in production this year. I just don't see why he wouldn't be draftable. At tight end, they got Jamison Gears. At tackle, they got Dylan Ray from Kentucky. And then on the interior, they got Marcellus Marshall from UCF. The offense is pretty unknown for this team. They like to run the ball. Darius Taylor's still there, so I do expect him to have a certain level of success. We'll just have to see. Taking a look at their defense, they got Devin Eastern on the interior. They also have Jalen Logan Redding on the interior. At nickel, they got Coy Pirich, although he's not really draft eligible right now, so he's just a good player for him that you need to know. At safety, they got Aiden Goisby and Kerry Brown that you should know about. And then on the edge, they got Lucas Finnessy, and at linebacker, they brought in Jeff Roberson from Oklahoma State. We'll see how that all meshes for this defense. They do have some good players to know. We'll just see if they're going to be able to figure it out and kind of mesh and make this all work out. But they have a pretty reasonable schedule, I would say. It's manageable for their skill level. They have an over-under 6.5, so this is going to be another tight one on if I'm going to hit the over on them. They have a young quarterback. I'm a little skeptical of them for that reason. I did give them wins over Buffalo, Northwestern State, and Purdue. However, I don't think they can beat Oregon or Ohio State. I think they're just a clear tier above them. Toss-ups against Cal, Rutgers, Nebraska, Iowa, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Wisconsin. I'm going to go ahead and hit them with a 6-6 record. I'm just not 100% confident in them, and 6-6 is pretty reasonable in my opinion for this team. They could hit more if Drake Lindsay hits, but until we know more about him, I'm comfortable with this record here. Moving on to the Nebraska Cornhuskers, they got Dylan Raiola returning for his second year, the sophomore, who's 6'3", 230. He did pretty good last year. He had a turnover problem that he needs to get under control. He doesn't really offer anything as a runner, but he had 2,800 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, 11 picks, and he hit 67.1% of his passes, which isn't bad for a true freshman starting. So I do expect him to take a step forward this year. Although, Patrick Mahomes clone. He's got to find his own thing, man. You're not going to make it if you keep just trying to clone somebody else. At receiver, they got Ja'Cory Barney Jr., but the guy I'm most excited about is Dane Key coming in from Kentucky. I think he could be a really good receiver for him. And I think he could break out, honestly, if Dylan Raiola takes a step forward and they're able to get this passing attack going. They also have Nazia Hunter from Cal who came in. At running back, they got Emmett Johnson. At tight end, they got Luke Lindenmeyer. They have former quarterback, now tight end, Heinrich Harburg also out there going to play some tight end now. So we'll see. He used to start prior to Dylan Raiola, so he made a position switch. We'll see if he's able to make an impact for him. At tackle, they get Elijah Pritchett, who came in from Alabama. He has some upside to him now. If he hits it, he could be an early draft pick. On the interior, they got Rocco Spindler, who came in from Notre Dame, and then they already had Hunter Lutovsky already on the roster, so those are guys that came in that could make an impact for him that you kind of need to know for the draft purposes. I think their offense has the potential to take a step forward. We'll just have to see if they're able to do it. On the defense, I don't know a ton of these guys. I'm not going to lie to you. I do have heard of Sair Wright at corner. He could be good for him. They got Elijah Judy at linebacker, on the interior of the defensive line. They got nickelback Malcolm Hartzog Jr. I've heard of him. He could make an impact. He's undersized, but that's why he plays the nickel. On the edge, they brought in Deshaun McCullough from Oklahoma and Marquise Watson Trent from Georgia Southern to play linebacker for him. I do trust Matt Rule, and I do think that he's going to be able to get his recruits to develop and step forward for him. They did lose some guys this year, but I actually think I trust the Huskers more than I should. They have a 7.5 win total projection here. I'm going to give them wins over Cincinnati, Akron, Houston Christian, Maryland, and Northwestern. That's 5 wins right off the top, and I'm going to say they can't beat Penn State. The rest of their games are all toss-ups, and I'm going to actually be aggressive and hit the over here on Nebraska and say they finish 8-4 this year. I think they take a step forward with Matt Rule, and I think they'll be happy with that development as they keep marching their way to the top. He's a good program builder, so you just got to trust him and give him the time to do it. Moving on now to Northwestern. This is a program that I don't think is going to be very good. They brought in Preston Stone from SMU, former highly recruited prospect who just didn't really live up to the hype there, lost his job to Jennings and, moved on. We'll see if he's able to capture any magic here. They got Frank Covey the fourth at receiver. receiver, they brought in Griffin Wild from South Dakota State, Chase Farrell from Stanford to also play receiver for him. At running back, they got Cam Porter. At tight end, they got Alex Lyons, who came in from New Mexico, and Hunter Welching, who was already there. I don't know who's going to start for him there. Tackle, they've got Caleb Kiernan, and Xavier Gray transferred in from Liberty. He also plays tackle. And then across the interior, they have a bunch of veteran guys, and Martise Lewis from Minnesota, Evan Bernstein from South Dakota State, and Jack Bailey, who was already there. This team is pretty hard to predict. You just don't know how it's all going to gel for them. They lost some of their better players, and I don't know what's going to happen for them here. At linebacker, they got Mitch Ulian on their defense. Edge, they got Aiden Hubbard, and then on the interior, they got Yanni Karloftis from Purdue, who is the brother of George Karloftis, the edge for the Chiefs. He has a different body type, so he's more of a linebacker than an edge type. He's an upperclassman. Don't know really what to expect out of him. On the interior, they have Najee Story, and then they also have Miguel Jackson, who transferred in from Utah State. At corner, they got Fred Davis, who came up from Jacksonville State. We'll see how he's able to adjust. I just don't know with this team, man. Their win total is pretty low at 3.5, and I think they have 3 easy wins on their schedule. I think they can beat Tulane, Western Illinois, and UL Monroe. Tulane, though, I almost did a toss-up. I just don't know exactly how their quarterback situation is going to all kind of shake out and end up settling, so I went ahead and gave Northwestern the win temporarily there. They have mostly L's on the schedule that I just don't think they can win. I gave them a few toss-ups, like Minnesota. I don't expect them to be able to beat, but that could be a closer game. Purdue, I think, could be a toss-up. And then UCLA, I just don't know what to expect from them with Nico. I'm not the biggest Nico Iamaleava fan, and it's not about his transfer either. It's just at Tennessee, there was times he was just way too inconsistent. He looked frantic, and watching his tape, I think he has a lot of developing to do, and I think he's going to a worse roster, so I don't know how that's going to play out. However, I do think the offense is probably better suited for him. Heupel's offense, I don't love it when evaluating a guy, so they're just a wild card, so that's why I did a lot of toss-ups for UCLA. Either way, 3-9 is what I'm going for Northwestern. I think they get them 3 wins and they probably lose out on the rest of the season. Don't expect them to be that great. As we move on now to the big dogs in the Ohio State Buckeyes. New quarterback this year in Julian Sayin. Hasn't played a whole lot. He's a sophomore. They got him technically as a transfer from Alabama. He transferred after Nick Saban retired. He was the number 1 quarterback recruit, and he's now with the Buckeyes. Like I said, played a little bit. His completion percentage sucked, but he threw 12 passes, I think it was. So what can you really expect out of him? Doesn't have elite size or anything, but he throws a good ball, at least from what I've seen, watching highlights of him from high school and stuff. At receiver, though, you gotta, Jeremiah Smith, you gotta know he's got to come back to college next year. He's not a draft guy, but you can't talk about the Buckeyes and not talk about the best player on their team and possibly the best player in the entire nation. You got to mention him. They also got Carnell Tate, who's a legitimate draft prospect. I haven't dug into his tape yet. I've had an issue with my film source. I downgraded my subscription for a little while there, and when I re-upgraded it after the draft, I haven't been given back all the being able to watch whatever film I want, so waiting for that to get resolved, and then I'll get back and be able to watch some more Carnell Tate film because I didn't have any cut-ups of his to watch yet. They also got Brandon Innes, who they expect to take a step forward for them. At running back, they got CJ Donaldson from West Virginia. He's a power back. He's not probably the most creative guy in the world from what I've seen, but I think he's going to be a good, solid player in this offense, and I think he's going to bring a good element to him. They also got James Peoples, who's an underclassman they expect big things out of. At tight end, they brought in Max Clare from Purdue, who could be a really good player. I don't think he's like first round prospect, but I think, college wise, he's going to be a good tight end. They also got Will Kazmarek, who is already there, but I think if I remember right, he's more of a blocking type. I could be wrong on that one, but if I remember properly, he's typically that way, but he is one of the better blocking guys in the nation. Then at tackle, they brought in Ethan Anawa from Rice, and then other than that, it's a bunch of underclassmen. They did lose a lot of guys to the draft, so we'll see what ends up happening there across their offensive line. But I expect big things out of this offense. With Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, I think they're going to be able to keep it going, plug new guys in, and just keep it rolling. They may not be as elite as last year, but I think they're still going to be a good offense. On defense, Caleb Downs, man. He's incredible, possibly the best defensive player in the nation right here on this same roster. It's impressive what they've been able to do, man, and what kind of talent, high-end talent they've been able to stockpile. They also got Sonny Styles at linebacker and Davidson Igbinosun. If he can ever get his penalties under control, he could be a really good corner. Hopefully he can start to do that because I would like to see him take a step forward. They also got on the edge Caden Curry. They got nickelback Lorenzo Styles Jr. On the edge, they got CJ Hicks, Jermaine Matthews at corner. They also got Kenyetta Jackson Jr. at edge, and then Averill Reese at linebacker. A lot of older guys here. You know, they have a lot of talent on the Ohio State Buckeyes team. They do have to replace a lot of guys. So we're gonna have to see who's able to step up, fill the role, and maybe be able to vault themselves into the draft next year. But they have a 10.5 win total, which is pretty impressive on your over-under standards. But then again, you go ahead and look at their schedule and you go, you know what? There's a strong chance they easily get to 10 wins. They really only have to worry about Texas, Penn State, and Michigan. And I don't know how great Michigan's going to be and if they're even going to be able to match up, but they've shown you in the past that they've been able to close that talent gap, even when they're not as good. Like last year, they shouldn't have been able to beat Ohio State, but they managed to do it. This year, though, I think Ohio State might drop one to either Texas or Penn State and then win out. I'm going to give them an 11-1 record. I'm expecting really big things from Ohio State. There's a lot of turnover on this roster, but I trust the coaches that are here. So we're going to go ahead and give them the wins and trust that they're able to develop and continue to be a really good team. Now we're going to move on to another really good team in the Big Ten, and that's the Oregon Ducks. They got a new quarterback this year as well. They finally got a guy they developed after bringing in from the transfer portal, and Dante Moore. He initially went to UCLA, transferred after his freshman season to Oregon. He was a late flip to UCLA, and then he kind of changed his mind, it looked like. Hasn't played a whole lot. He's a sophomore redshirt, 6'3", 210. Another highly rated guy, though, so I have no doubt that he actually has talent. Haven't really watched him. Not going to pretend I have. Just seen high school highlights and different highlights from college. At receiver, they got Kyler Casper, Gary Bryant Jr., who I honestly forgot was even there. And then they got DeCorian Moore, who's a true freshman they brought in. That's really exciting. And Malik Benson, who transferred in from FSU, could take a step forward for this offense. Now, as you can see, I do have Evan Stewart still listed just because he's such a great player. And you got to mention he's hurt. I think it was an ACL injury, if I remember right. He's not going to play this year, more likely than not. It's pretty devastating for him. I was expecting big things from him, and I was really hoping to see him take a step forward as far as his draft prospects went, because I think he had an NFL future for sure. It's just, at times he kind of just got in his own way, in my opinion, and just didn't live up to his hype. And I was really hoping to see him be able to do that this year. At running back, though, they brought in Mekhi Hughes from Tulane. They also had Noah Whittington already on roster. They got Kenyon Shadiq at tight end. And then at tackle, they brought in Isaiah World from Nevada and Alex Harkey from Texas State. On the interior, they got Emmanuel Pregnon from USC as well. I think this offense will be good. It's just all about what Dante Moore can do. Now, flipping over to their defense, I still expect big things out of them, even with all the draft prospects they lost off of this team. They still have Mateo Uyunglele, who's a great edge rusher. They got Bryce Butcher at linebacker, and they got Dylan Teenman, who transferred in from Purdue. He's a really good safety. I expect really good production out of him, and I think he's going to fit in well here for the Ducks. They also brought in Theron Johnson from Northwestern at safety. Barry Alexander's kind of a wild card. He can't ever seem to develop and stick with a team, so I'm not sure, but he's a very highly rated recruit coming out of high school, so he has potential. We'll see if he can ever figure it out. And then their other edge, they also got Tatum Tui, too, who is also an NFL prospect, but I expect their defense to be good underneath Dan Lanning. And they're another team that's a 10.5 over under. And honestly, looking at this, the only games I'm worried about is Penn State, USC, and Washington. And even then, I am a little sketchy in saying maybe they'll lose to USC and Washington. To me, I think they could go undefeated in the regular season. I really do. I just don't know about Dante Moore. So I'm going to say they lose to Penn State and Drew Aller's experience and finish 11-1 this year. They're still going to hit the over. They're still going to be a really good team. But as long as they're able to do what I expect, I think this is a easy contender to be a 12-0 team. Doesn't mean they're going to do it, but they're one of the few contenders in the nation that I really think could do it. Now, moving on to the Penn State Nittany Lions. They got Drew Aller at quarterback, 3,300 yards, 24 touchdowns, 8 picks, 66.5% of his passes, 6 rushing touchdowns, another 300 yards, 6'5", 236. He's got everything you're looking for. He's just inconsistent. I've already started watching his tape. He has to develop and step forward, but he just has moments where I don't know why he can't hit a pass. He'll get the yips almost and just chuck it out of bounds. And I'm like, what are you doing? The guy's wide open and he just misses. That's off of preliminary. I've got one, I think, full tape of his already done, and I'm working on the second tape. He's actually the quarterback I'm studying right now. We'll have to see on that for him. But the rest of their offense, they got Tyseer Denmark, who's an underclassman. They got Kyron Hudson from USC, who transferred in to play receiver. And Trebor Pena came in from Syracuse to play receiver. He's going to be a really good, I think, player for them. They also have Devontae Ross, who transferred in from Troy. And Liam Clifford, of course, a still here on this roster. They have a lot of older guys, so I had to point them all out, and a lot of transfers who came in. At running back, they got Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Beasts, man. Really like them. I think they're both draftable. I'd probably say they're both in the top 3 rounds. Katron Allen could slip into the 4th round. We'll see. He's played a lot of ball, so I'm not sure if he'll be able to improve his draft stock, but I have like a 3 to 4 round grade on him. At tight end, they got Luke Reynolds trying to replace Tyler Warren. They also have Khalil Dinkins, who could step up as well on this team at tight end. At tackle, they have Drew Shelton, who I do believe is a pretty good prospect. Haven't watched any tackles yet, so I'm not going to pretend to know about him. They got Nolan Rucci as well at tackle. And then on the interior, they got Nick Dawkins, and this name's going to make me look stupid, but Ola Vega Ione, maybe is how you pronounce that. Vavega. I don't know. But those are guys as well that are seniors that you might need to know for the NFL draft. I expect this offense to be good, and I think you'd be crazy to think they're just going to suck on offense. I think Andy Koldonicki, their offensive coordinator, probably becomes a head coach after this season, and Penn State might need to regroup going into the next itineration of their team, losing Drew Aller and probably Koldonicki, but I don't think that's going to stop them from being a good team this year. Looking at their defense, they got Zakee Wheatley, who I think is really good. Danny Dennis Sutton at edge is the player they're going to expect to step up here. And then they got Zane Durant on the interior, who I do think is a really good player. They also have Zaria Fisher at the edge position, who's going to be stepping in, but they don't expect as much out of him as they do Danny Dennis Sutton. They also have some underclassmen like LeVar Arrington's kids there playing that kind of hybrid role that Abdul Carter played. I don't expect a whole lot out of him this year, but he might be able to fill the role and do something. At linebacker, they got Dominic DeLuca, and then at corner, they got AJ Harris and Elliott Washington II, and then at nickelback, Zion Tracy are all players you should know on their defense. I think their defense will be fine. They should be able to do okay. Sorry, my daughter's woken up a few times, so I had to step away. So if this is a little bit choppy here in a few spots, it's because she woke up. Looking at Penn State's over-under, it's 10.5. And I do think they're going to have a pretty easy time getting there for the most part. Really, they have 2 tough games. It's Oregon and it's Ohio State. The question is, do you think you're going to take one of them? And I'm going to say I do think they take one of them, and I'm going to give them an 11-1 record. And it seems crazy to say, but I think there might be 3 teams to go 11-1 in this conference, at least in the regular season. I think they could basically all lose to each other and, 1-1-1 and split it up like that. I really think these are 3 elite teams. Now, I could be wrong on them, but I just trust Penn State for some reason. James Franklin's a good coach, and they do good in the regular season. They just were missing the 4-team playoff. I think this era is built for him. He's going to get his team in, and they're going to be able to compete. Now let's go ahead and move on to the Purdue Boilermakers. This one, I don't really have an answer on who their quarterback's going to be. It's completely wide open. They have Ryan Brown, who transferred to UNC and just came back. They have Bennett Meredith, who was there and played some last year. They have Malachi Singleton, who came in from Arkansas, and then they have Evans Chuba, who came in from Washington State. I don't know who's going to start for him here. It's pretty wide open, so we'll just have to wait and see who gets this competition and, who gets the chance to start. I do think we'll probably see multiple starters here, if we're being honest. At wide receiver, they got Denylon Morissette, Nitro Tuggle, who transferred in from Georgia, who is still an underclassman, and he's not eligible for the draft, but he transferred in. He will start for him. He's a really talented player. They also got Charles Ross from USC to come in and play receiver. At running back, they got Devin Mokachobi. At tight end, they got Christian Moore, who came in from UNLV. At tackle, they got Jalen St. John, who came in from UNLV as well, which they came in with Barry Odom, who's the new head coach of their Purdue Boilermakers. So we'll see, if those guys are able to transfer up. They also got Jordani Vaccaro from Manitoba, from Canada, who came in and transferred up. That's a really interesting get. I don't know how he'll translate, but it could be interesting. Flipping it over here to the defensive side, they got Tony Grimes, who's been around for a while. He was at UNC. He was a 4-star commit, really good player. He transferred away to UNLV to play for Barry Odom. He followed him to Purdue. We'll see if he's able to step back up in competition and refine his form. He's kind of fallen off since them North Carolina days. I know he played at Texas A&M as well. They also got CJ Nunley IV, who came in from Akron. They got Crew Wakely, who came in from BYU to play safety. At linebacker, they got Manny Powell, who transferred up from UNLV as well. They also got Richard Toney Jr., who came in from TCU. They got Taj Rael, who came in from Memphis to play nickelback for him as well. There's a lot of transfers on this team, and this team's just not really that great. They only have a 3.5 win total for the season. Ball State and Southern Illinois are likely their wins. And I only gave them 1 toss-up against Northwestern. I'm going to say they lose it, and that's how they're going to finish 2-10 this season. I'm not very confident in Purdue at all. Ultimately, I think they're going to be a bad team, and Barry Odom's going to have to be patient, and Purdue's going to have to be patient while he rebuilds them. Losing Jeff Brom really hurt this team, and they just haven't been able to rebound. They just haven't been able to come back from it. So it's pretty disappointing for them. We're going to move on, though, to Rutgers. They got Ethan Kaliakmanis at quarterback. He threw for 2,700 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks. He had 3 more rushing touchdowns, another 250 yards, but his completion percentage was really low at 53.9. He's a senior, 6'3", 215. I don't think he has much of an NFL future, if you ask me. He'd have to take a huge step forward to be able to do that. At wide receiver, they got Ian Strong and KJ Duff, who's an underclassman, not eligible for the draft at all. They also got DT Sheffield, who transferred in from North Texas. At running back, they got CJ Campbell Jr. from FAU. At tight end, they got Kenny Fletcher Jr., Tyler Needham at tackle, Brian Felter, and Gus Solinskis across the interior of the offensive line. I don't know what to expect from this offense. I'm not going to be overly optimistic with it. I do think they're going to miss Kyle Monangai personally, so we'll have to see as we start looking at their defense here. They got Daryl DeJabome, edge Eric O'Neill, who comes in from James Madison. It's a step up for him, but he had a really good year, so I'll be excited to see if he's able to grow and develop and take advantage of this opportunity in the Big Ten. They also got Cam Miller, who transferred there from Penn State. On the interior of the defensive line, they got Doug Blue Eli from USF. On the edge, they got Bradley Weaver from Ohio, and then at safety, they got Jet Elod from UNLV. I just don't know how much this team's really going to be able to mesh. I trust Greg Schiano probably more than I should. I think he's a good college coach. Even though I'm not high on Ethan Kaliakmanis, I think a 5.5 win total is a little low, and they've been able to overachieve that for the most part, especially when they got Ohio, Miami, Ohio, Norfolk State on their schedule, and then Maryland and Purdue are 2 teams I think they can beat, which gives them 5 wins right there. So I'm going to actually give this team an overachieving record of 7-5. I think they're going to still be in the middle. I think Kaliakmanis might be able to do enough, even though I'm not that high on him. I think he might be able to do enough if he improves a little bit to get this team a little bit further than many expected and get them to a bowl. Moving on now to UCLA. This team, I don't know what to make of them, to be honest with you. Nico Iamaleava comes in from Tennessee. He has 2 years of eligibility left. He's 6'6", 220. Or actually, he has 3 years. He's just a sophomore. So he can play 3 more years in college. He's 6'6", like I said, 220. Big guy. He threw for 2,600 yards last year, 19 touchdowns, 7 picks. Ran for another 350 yards and 3 scores. Hit 63.8% of his passes. Ran a weird offense, though. Heupel's offense is just not really translatable to anybody else's, so I don't know what to expect as far as his development at UCLA and if he's going to be able to step forward in this offense. They do have Titus Mokiano Atalima at wide receiver. I don't know if I said that right. Atamalala, I guess is actually what it is. They also got Quasi Gilmer, who's an underclassman. They got Mickey Matthews, the transfer from Cal, who came in. At running back, they got Jalen Berger. At tight end, they got Hudson Habermeal. At tackle, they got Cortland Ford, who came in from Kentucky, and they already had Garrett DiGiorgio. We'll see what's able to go on there. On the interior, they have Oluwafantu at Kishilo as well on their roster. Don't really know a whole lot about this team here and like how they're going to mesh on offense. If Iamaleava is able to develop a little bit and he looks better in a more pro style attack, I actually think this team might be better than even I'm predicting here, because I'm pretty low on them, honestly, I think, and I'm not sure how it's going to look with Iamaleava under center, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to develop more than he already has. We'll have to see, though, honestly. It's just a lot of unknowns. I'm not real sure where UCLA stands. At corner, they got Jameer Johnson from Indiana. They got Siali Tupaki, who plays on the interior. And then at Devin Apuu, who plays on the edge. I'm not good with these names. I don't know them off the top of my head. On the edge, they got Jacob Busiek. On the interior, they got Keanu Williams. At linebacker, they got John Vaughns. And at safety, they got Key Lawrence from Ole Miss. And then at nickelback, they got Benjamin Perry from Louisville. A lot of new pieces on this team, like I said, and I really don't know what to expect out of them. They got a 5.5 win total. I got 3 wins for them. Or actually, I can't count. I only have 2 wins for them. Most of these games are toss-ups or losses. I don't think they can beat Ohio State, Washington, Indiana, or Penn State. And then they got toss-ups throughout here. Utah out of conference, Northwestern, Michigan State, Maryland, Nebraska, and USC. I'm gonna go and hit the under on UCLA to be safe and say they can finish 5-7 this year. Just not 100% sure about these guys, and I don't really trust them, so I think it's just safe to hit the under on a team you feel like that about. Next up, we got the USC Trojans. Jaden Maviava's gonna be their starting quarterback this year. He's a junior redshirt, 6'4", 225, 1,200 yards last year, 11 touchdowns, 6 picks, added 4 rushing touchdowns, hit almost 60% of his passes. Inconsistent's really all I can say about him after he transferred from, I think it was UNLV last year. And then He played last year after they benched Miller Moss. I got to be honest with you, Lincoln Riley's offense just seems to have lost its fastball right now. It's just, I don't know, man. He was such a good play caller for so long in Oklahoma, and he spoke the quarterbacks and did everything right. And then even with Caleb Williams, there was just moments where you're like, what are you doing here? And I think it's carried over with lesser talent, and I'm a little afraid for USC here, but we'll see how I feel about him overall. They got Jacoby Lane at wide receiver. Makai Lemon is an absolute high ceiling draft prospect. He could be one of the top 5 players in next year's class. They got Prince Strachan from Boise State at receiver as well. At running back, they brought in Wayman Jordan from Hutchinson Community College and Eli Sanders from New Mexico. At tight end, they got Lake McCree. Across the interior of the offensive line, they brought in Janor Reed from Syracuse, DJ Winfield from New Mexico, and Alani Noah was already there. So we'll have to see if they're able to get this offense on track and if Madiava is able to get the turnovers under control and play a little bit better. On their defense, they have some guys, but again, I just don't think it's the strength of their team. They got Eric Gentry on the edge, Prophet Brown at nickel, and then at safety, Kamari Ramsey. They also have Anthony Lucas at another edge position. Keyshawn Silver transferred in from Kentucky. DJ Harvey at corner from San Jose State. And Bishop Fitzgerald, who plays safety from NC State. I don't know what to make of this defense, and I really don't know what to make of this team. But I trust Lincoln Riley to think he's going to be able to get it turned around a little bit this year. They only have a 7.5 win total. And it doesn't mean I think they're going to suddenly step up to be a 10-win team or anything. But I do think they can beat Missouri State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Michigan State, and Northwestern. That gives them 5 wins right there. And then if they split the rest of their games, that gets them to 8-4, and I think that's what we're going to finish up with USC at, is 8-4 on the season. I'm not sure exactly how it's all going to play out for them, but I think it's a big year for Lincoln Riley. And I'm really not sure if he's going to be able to get it on track there and figure it out, or if he needs to reset and take a step back. But for the sake of all the Trojan fans out there, I hope he can get it figured out for y'all. Next up, we got the Washington Huskies. They got Desmond Williams Jr. stepping into the starting role for Jedd Fisch. He threw for 944 yards, 8 touchdowns, and a pick. He hit 78% of his passes last year. He rushed for another 282 yards and 2 more scores. He's just a sophomore. He's undersized at 5'11", 190, but he can throw the ball pretty well, it looks like. Now, looking at the rest of their team, Denzel Boston's a receiving prospect that you do got to know about. He has the chance to be one of the top 15 receivers in next year's class, in my opinion, and maybe even higher than that. I've heard some people getting pretty high on him. Haven't watched this film, so I can't say that for sure. They also have Kevin Green Jr., and then they brought in Omari Evans from Penn State. Now at running back, they got Jonah Coleman. He's one of the easily top 10 running backs in the nation next year, and he'll be highly drafted, probably in the first 3 rounds easily, in my opinion. We'll have to see, though. He still has another season to play, and things can change there. At tight end, they got Quentin Moore, and then at tackle, they brought in Carver Willis from Kansas State, and on the interior, it was Gary and Hatchett from Oklahoma. Jedd Fisch is a good offensive play caller, and I do think their offense improved as the season went along last year. I think Desmond Williams actually played pretty well when he stepped in, so there's some hope that this team will be able to get on track again. They won't probably be to the height of where they were a few years ago yet, but I think they're heading in the right direction again. On the defensive side, they got Ephesians Prysock at corner. He's a long guy that I think could really develop for him. On the edge, they got Zach Dufree, who's been there for a while. And then they also brought in Takario Davis, who's an interesting draft prospect out of Arizona. He's had some hype. He didn't play real well last year. We'll see if getting back there with Jedd Fisch is going to be able to remotivate him and get him back on track and just make things go better for him. He has a lot of upside, though. On the interior, they got Ontario Thompson, who came in from Western Michigan. And then they also got Javon Parker, who was already there, and Samantha Peppa, who came in from Utah. Sorry if you heard my daughter cry in the background there. I got Mikel Esteen, a safety, as well on their roster, and Dyson McCutcheon, who's going to be their nickelback. They have a lot of turnover. They also lost their defensive coordinator, so we'll be able to, Steve Belichick followed his dad to North Carolina, so we'll see if they're able to keep that defense strong. They actually played pretty well last year, but I do project this team to take a step forward, I think. They're expected to have 7.5 win total, and for me, I think that that's a pretty good number for them to be able to get to. I think they can beat Colorado State, UC Davis, Washington State, Maryland, Wisconsin, Purdue, and UCLA. And I don't think they'll beat Ohio State. And then they do have some toss-ups in there. I don't want to get too aggressive with them, but I think an 8-4 final record is a pretty good number for the Huskies. And I think they'll easily be able to get there. I have a lot of faith in them. And I think that Jed Fish is a really good coach. Now, I do think he could leave Washington and treat him as a stepping stone if they take a big step forward, which sucks for the Husky fans. But I think he's a good coach, and I think this is a good team that has improved. Now we're going to move on to our final team here in the Big Ten, and that's the Wisconsin Badgers. I think they're in a tough spot underneath Luke Fickell, and I think he's really in jeopardy of losing his job. At quarterback, they got Billy Edwards Jr., who transferred in from Maryland. He's nothing special. 2,800 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 picks, hit 65% of his passes. Not much of a runner, but he did score 5 touchdowns. I think he could be a good college quarterback. I just don't see, as far as nothing special, I mean, as far as the NFL draft goes, because, you know, I focus heavily on draft for a good chunk of the year, and we're going to get into summer scouting still, even with the video game content coming back to the channel. We're still going to do summer scouting, and I want to get it out. I don't know how many positions I'll get through because, like I said, I'm still waiting for access to library again. As soon as that's up and running, I'll be able to get diving into scouting real quick. At receiver, they got Vinny Anthony II, Trek Kikuana, and Jaden Ballard, who came in from Ohio State. At running back, they got Cade Yakimelli, I think is how you say that. At tight end, they got Tucker Ashcraft, who I have heard of him. I think he has an NFL future, possibly. At tackle, they got Riley Malman and Davis Heitzman, who came in from Central Michigan. On the interior, they got Kerry Codano, Joe Brunner, and Jake Renfro on this team as well. They have a lot of upperclassmen on the offense, but I'm just not sure how I feel about their quarterback position and just their overall situation. I know they changed coordinators, so maybe that'll help them again, but I'm just not real sure with this team, to be honest with you. Taking a look at their defense, they got Nizier Forqueen at corner, Ricardo Hallman at corner, and Austin Brown at nickelback. And then they got a lot of transfers and a lot of guys that just don't have a lot of production yet. They got Charles Perkins off the edge from UT Martin. They also got Mason Reiger from Louisville, who plays the edge. Corey Walker from Western Michigan, who's an interior defensive lineman. Parker Peterson from Tulane's also an interior D lineman. And then they had Ben Barton. They also had edge Daryl Peterson and safety Preston Zachman as well. So I don't know. This defense is a lot of new right now, and I'm just not sure about the Badgers. Their over-under is 5.5, so I don't think they're very high on them, and I don't expect myself to be very high on them. I gave them wins over Miami of Ohio, Mid-Tennessee State, and Maryland. I don't think they'll beat Alabama, Iowa, Ohio State, Oregon, or Washington. The rest of their games are toss-ups, and we're going to go on the low side here and finish them up at 5-7 on the season. The Badgers just, unfortunately, are not a team that I'm very confident in, and I don't expect this to go particularly great for Luke Fickell. And even though I was really high on the hire when it happened, it's starting to look like it might not have been a good decision, and he just didn't fit there, unfortunately, because he is a good coach, and I do firmly believe that. I think just sometimes fit isn't what you were hoping for. So I want to thank you for watching. Next up, we're going to probably hit the Big 12, I think will be the next conference we work on before we get into the NFL. If you hear my daughter crying in the background, I'm sorry. She is teething, so there's nothing I can do, but you know, she's with my wife right now and just crying. So there's nothing we can do, unfortunately, but I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Have a great day. I'll catch you in the next one. I'm out.